What's up, War Stories fans? I want to talk to you about Ocker leather duty gear for a minute. When performance is your number one priority, we all know choosing the right gear for the job is crucial to your mission success. I used Ocker leather duty gear almost exclusively. If they made it, that's what I used. Ocker leather duty gear gives you the confidence to perform at the highest level in the field, day in and day out. With over 40 years of experience crafting high-quality products for the law enforcement community, Ocker Leather specializes in making holsters, belts, and all the other accessories, and they stand the test of time. Let me tell you, I still have all my Ocker duty gear, and it is well worn in, but still as nice as the day I got it. Major municipal and federal agencies from LAPD and Border Patrol trust Ocker to outfit their officers with duty gear that wears in and not out. And it's made in America since 1981, so that is awesome. Ocker is renowned for being the best name in leather, so visit OckerLeather.com and use the coupon code WARSTORIES for 10% off your order. That's Adam, King, Edward, Robert, Lincoln, Edward, Adam, Tom, Henry, Edward, Robert.com and use coupon code WARSTORIES for 10% off your order.
Warning, this podcast has stories of real-life events and true crime that happens every day. These stories may contain adult language and graphic or disturbing details not suitable for everyone. Listener discretion is advised. In our society, most people are content to go through their daily lives safely and peacefully. But our society is not always safe or peaceful. For that reason, some men and women answer a higher calling to defend and protect their fellow man. You probably know someone who is one of these people, or maybe you are one of these people. The ones who see and do the things most people would never want to. These things are sometimes heroic and beautiful, but often they are horrific and terrifying. It's these things they don't share about with other people. It's these things they carry with them, so you don't have to. But when they get together, they talk to each other about them. And they call these stories War Stories.
Welcome to another episode of War Stories. I'm Tom.
And I'm Chuck.
And we are back for this week's episode. And I'm still kind of coming down from the high of Joe Mantegna. Joe frickin' Mantegna.
That was interesting. That was a really good interview. He's very humble, and he's just an all-around awesome guy and a true supporter of anything to do with first responders, and as well as with his own countrymen, city people.
Yeah, anybody that's service oriented, he's there. He's all about it. I can honestly say that I've met a lot of actors, both in my professional life and personal life, especially growing up in LA and being around the film industry my whole life. And I could tell you he's 100% absolutely one of the nicest guys. No ego, just cool. Just cool.
Definitely very cool. I was really interested when he told me he had family members in the military, and it was the Marine Corps, which was really cool.
Well, of course, you're all about that. As soon as he said Marine Corps, and then I could see your eyes going wide, eyeballing all the stuff, the Marine Corps stuff behind him,
He had a lot, that's for sure.
And you know what? You don't get that kind of stuff from the Marine Corps unless you do a lot for the Marine Corps. You just don't. They don't hand that stuff out like, trinkets and souvenirs. That's legit, like service oriented stuff. So it's nice to see. But this week you've got Marc here with us. What's up, Marc?
What's going on, gentlemen? What's going on?
It's nice to meet you. This is the first time I've met you. I know Chuck does all the scheduling. So let's get this right out of the way. If you want to try and get yourself scheduled, you can email Chuck at booking.warstories@gmail.com. And that goes right to him. Or
if you can't remember that, come to us on Instagram, direct message us, and
DM.
then I will start setting it up, and we'll go from there, and then we'll talk through email because it's easier for us to go through the email, but we want you to come and contact us. So if you have to, Instagram, DM, and we can go from there because that's a little bit easier to remember than writing down the email. But if you've got great memory, great.
But Marc, you actually have a presence on social media. You're in law enforcement, but you also are involved in some fitness stuff. So why don't you just start with, give us your background, how you got into law enforcement, tell us what you're all about, and then we'll move on to your social media and fitness stuff, and then we'll talk about your stories.
Sounds good. So yeah, I have about 18 and a half years on. I'm a sergeant from LAPD. I started, my father was in law enforcement. So it was kind of like that story where I would just hear all the stories, all the crazy things that would be happening when he was working Vice and Beach
Was
Patrol
he LAPD?
and all that kind of stuff. He was LAPD.
What years do you know?
Oof. I know it was in the 80s because I remember seeing a lot of Olympic stuff around the 1984 Olympics.
So if your dad worked the Olympics, then our dads worked together.
Oh, that's cool.
I mean, a
That
lot
is
of guys
awesome.
worked the Olympics, but
Yes.
my dad came on in 72, and then the Olympics were a big thing for him. He was heavily involved in that. And through doing that kind of stuff, he went into emergency management. So that's cool. You're a LAPD kid, a law enforcement kid, like both Chuck and I as well.
Yep. And I got inspired by the stories, man. I always wanted to know more. He would quiz me on the way, like whenever we were driving. He was like, okay, let's say somebody's on the beach. Okay, they're on the east side of the beach and they have an open container. What is the penal code? And I'm like freaking 7 years old, like looking up codes and stuff like that. Like that was me. I'm like the geek. I'm still like that, to be honest. And my brother, who happened to be in the car, he ended up taking the other side of the law, but he would always answer the questions too. So, but it was like really, it was just really exciting. And I'm like, hey, this is kind of what I want to be. And it just from early on, that was just like the direction that I was heading. And we'll probably get into it in my story and stuff like that. It didn't go as picture perfect as it could have been, because I kind of let my weight get in the way and let my health get in the way. But I'm sure that's something we'll chat about here real soon.
For sure. So you've been in law enforcement 18 years, 18 and a half years with LAPD, all with LAPD.
Yes.
So that means you got hired as a white male during the white male dark ages.
It was 2002. And I mean, it was crazy because everybody else was getting hired in like 3 or 4 months. And it was about maybe month number 10. And then my background investigator called me and she was like, you know what? We lost your file. I have to do backgrounds again. And so it was about 6 months. It was about 6 months after that. She was the nicest lady ever. She was the best detective, man, I swear. But I honestly do think she went on vacation, came back, and it was like she had turned it in and was gone. So anyway, yes, it took me a little bit longer to get into the academy, but I'm kind of glad because the academy class that I had was pretty awesome.
You know, what's interesting is that's right around the time I was looking at getting into. I was going to the police academy in 2002. And then soon after that, I think in 2005, I was testing for LAPD, thinking about lateraling. So we would have been coming on the job around the same time and stuff. You would have had seniority on me. What the hell?
I'm going to tell you what to do, huh? No,
that's right. So now you are. Well, are you working patrol? Are you in special assignments? What are you doing?
I'm in investigations. I'm actually working for internal affairs right now.
Ooh. Yeah. And I will tell you this. I don't care what anybody says. See, Chuck has the same reaction as a lot of people. My dad worked internal affairs, right? And I got a friend that works internal affairs for another major LA area agency. And internal affairs is one of those things where it could go either way. You can go there and be on the quote unquote rat squad, or you can go there and actually do the Lord's work by trying to clear good cops from bullshit cases. You really can, right? And so I don't take a stance on IA one way or the other because my dad put away some really fucking dirty cops, you know, murder for hire, credit card fraud, armed robbery kind of shit.
Good Lord. Murder for hire. Jesus.
Yeah. You go look up Ford and Von Velas in LAPD history. They robbed a jewelry store in the Northridge Mall and used a police rover to do it.
Oh, you know what? I think we talked about that. I have heard about that. That is pretty intense.
So I don't think there's any problem with people who are honorable police officers going to make sure that the profession stays honorable. It's just how if you decide to use it as a political weapon versus if you decide to do the Lord's work.
Right. I'm with you.
So now you have a social media presence that involves fitness as well. And I guess that ties into your story. So do you want to just
go into your story and kind of naturally head into that, or do you want to kind of preface it with your information first? It's however you want.
I'm good. No, I'm good with just jumping into my story. If you're
all right.
cool
Well, then the floor is yours, man. What's your story?
All right, cool. So before I got on, I kind of talked about this beforehand. Kind of let my health kind of slip. I weighed 100 pounds more than I do now. I was like 267, and I had to get into the academy. And so, like, I had this dream my whole life, right? I went to college. It was the time between high school and college that I gained this weight. So I had to get on the department. So I was like doing everything that I physically could try and do, running, taking a bunch of supplements, testosterone boosters, like anything that I could possibly do to try to lose weight. And it was the ups and downs, right? I was able to lose enough in an extremely unhealthy way to actually get into the academy. But then once I got into the academy and I got on duty, like the same thing, ups and downs and ups and downs. I mean, being on probation and all that kind of stuff, just it weighed on me. And of course, I resorted to food. And so I had this struggle for like many, many years. A lot of people, I'm a little over 6 foot, so I hold my weight pretty well. And so a lot of people didn't realize I was struggling with it. But it was just like an up and down thing. And it was at the time that, so I had met my wife before coming on LAPD. And so she saw the struggle with my weight as well. But we had my son, I had about maybe 8 or 9 years on the department at this time, just up and down with my weight. And what I didn't realize is like, I was literally giving it all to my career. I was not spending a lot of time with my wife. I still was not eating healthy. I was actually in West Valley, working gang impact team with Tom Smart. I worked like every single overtime shift you can possibly know. I was a court qualified expert for multiple gangs in West Valley. At the time we had, Topanga Division didn't exist. And so I was like that go-to person. I would just answer every call that I could throughout the day, search warrants, all that kind of stuff. And I was kind of, like I said, giving it all to my career. And I had lost contact. Yeah. And to me, to be honest, I was using the career kind of like as an excuse to not do those things. And I didn't realize that I was kind of making that be that way. I thought that I could only like really own one of those areas, whether it's my family or my health or my work. And I kind of like in my brain somehow like made it feel okay to just give it all to my career.
You lost the balance.
So, well, because the career,
dude, I had no balance.
The career means you have to support the family, right? So the career comes first so that you can support the family. And then you take a back seat because then when you do have time for your family, you don't exercise. So, you're like, oh, well, the exercise, I'll do that eventually.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I see with a lot of younger coppers, because I'm assuming you were probably younger on the job at that point.
I was. Yeah.
A lot of younger coppers don't know that balance yet. And it's really hard for them to find that balance. And honestly, it's going to take a lot of trial and error and failing to get yourself where you need to be. And
yeah. So you're about 9 years on at this point?
Got about 9 years on. My son was born. He was 1 pound 9 ounces. He had to be.
Oh wow! How early was he?
Wow.
He's 27 weeks.
Oh man!
So he had to spend 73 days in the NICU. And it was like my first son. First kid, and they're like, oh, hey, we know you had like the, baby shower, and everything. And you were expecting to bring your kid home, but yeah, he's not going to be coming home. You guys can go home and you can come and visit him every day. And it was like, what? So, we had to like leave him at the hospital. We had to come visit him every day. On the 73rd day, he came home and he had like an oxygen tank with him. So it was just like really crazy. But, what had happened is because that was like my rock bottom moment. I kind of like took that all on me, basically saying that like, okay, like he didn't get to choose who his father was, but I felt like I had let him down because I wasn't able to be there necessarily physically and mentally because I had like a huge mental breakdown at that point. Like I'm physically not able to show up. I have all of these things that I have going on at work. And then this happens to my son. And I'm like kind of like in the, oh, woe is me kind of mentality. And it was like, I was all over the place. I had to go see and spend some time with BSS. Like it got to that point where I was just like, I developed shingles. I mean, I was like basically shut down. And
now explain to the audience what BSS is.
BSS is Behavioral Sciences Services. Basically, it's our police psychologists. It's the psychologists that are assigned to LAPD. So if you ever get involved in a shooting or any kind of traumatic incident, you would go see them. Of course, if you have some incidents that are happening at home that affect you on duty, they also allow you and your family to kind of go in and see them.
Right.
So I basically had like convinced myself that it was my fault that this kind of had all happened. And it was at that point that I had decided, like, okay, I have no idea what I'm going to do, but like, I'm going to get this under control. I'm going to make my family a priority. I'm going to make my health a priority, and I'm going to still own my career, but I'm going to do it by setting better boundaries around what I can and can't do. So that way, when I am there, I can own that time. But when I'm unplugged, like I'm completely unplugged. And so that kind of started the venture for me in terms of like, first I started to lose weight. I ended up losing about 100 pounds total. So I'm down to like 167, 170-ish is normally what I'm at. After doing that, I'm like, okay, like this is true. I could still own my career over here and have better health, but how about like I connect better with my family? How could I make the time that I do have with them even better? And so I started to develop myself in that area, reading books, hanging out with masterminds. There's this great podcast called the Dad Edge podcast. Great podcast about being a better father, being a better husband. And literally by doing that, I was able to find the sweet spot in all three of these areas. And I realized that it's kind of like a pillar. They actually hold everything up. And if you're not having a good, solid family life, then the others are going to crumble down, because when you're at work, you're thinking about what's happening over there, or you're not, your head isn't on right. So you can't think right when you're running a search warrant. You're never present anywhere. You're not. You're just being crap at everything, right? And so when I was able to like lift all three of these up, I realized that maybe I'm not spending as much time at work, but when I am there, I am like on point. Same when I'm with my family. Maybe I can't spend as much time as I want to, but when I am, I'm intentional with them. Like the electronics are off, and I'm like really connecting with them by asking them like positive, generative questions. And then when I'm on track with my health and fitness, it's not taking me all day, but I'm like really intentional with it. And so by doing that, I got into great shape. I was doing much better at work, and of course, connecting better with my family. So people started to ask me like, hey dude, like, what did you do? What are you doing that is kind of doing this? And so that's when I started to put together groups, mastermind teams, things like that, where I could help lift other people up who were in our career, because I saw so many people doing that. Like Chuck says, like, especially when you're on, like in the beginning, you're so excited. You're like, this is all, like, you are the police, right? That's like a part of your identity. You're like, it's not a job. It's like, this is me. And when you need to have that separation at some point, and sometimes it takes longer than others. Some people never separate, right? But like realizing that just isn't you. That's just a part of you, right? But there's these other parts of you that you can really develop and hone. And when you do that, it makes the whole totality better.
Wow.
It's
pretty
true.
Intense.
It is true. I mean, you don't realize, I said this about, when I was going through the retirement process, you're wound so tightly that you never know how tightly wound you are until you actually start to unwind. Mm-hmm. And then you start to see these things unfold, and you're like, oh my gosh, I thought I was handling that.
Yeah.
Mark, let me ask you this.
Mm-hmm.
What was the key? Because I know a lot of people are probably listening going, well, how'd you turn it off once you got home? Mm-hmm. So how did you turn off being on for 12 hours, 10 hours a day, 3-4 times a week, maybe even 5 sometimes? How did you turn it off once you went home?
That's a great question. So I didn't necessarily compartmentalize, because you can't necessarily do that.
Right.
But what I did is before I step into that next role that I'm going to be, I make sure that I kind of like realize what like who needs me to be on my A game. This is what I mean. So in the morning time, when I wake up, it's like, it's coaching, it's exercising, it's like meditation, it's like me time, right? And so for me, I'm like, okay, I need to do this so I can become better for everybody. It gives me that chance of like letting out the anxiety, any of the frustrations, anything like that. And then at a certain time, I go into LAPD. I'm on the 10s now. So before I actually get in, I'm like, okay, who needs me to be on my A game? Okay, this is all intentional time here at work. What can I best do to, like you guys said earlier, like if the officer didn't do it, like I'm going to investigate the hell out of that thing to prove that it didn't happen. Right. And the opposite, like if they did, then, hey, that's where the chips are going to land. Right. But I give it all right there, and I keep it so that I'm not like intermixing like work and home and things like that. And then when I get home, I'm like sitting in the garage and I take a breath and I go, okay, I can either walk through the door right now and I can be like the upset, frustrated, somebody's been yelling at me all day police officer, and police sergeant, or I could be the best dad and the best husband that I can possibly be, because I'm not going to get this time back. Right. And so that's just like a mental shift where I'm like, okay, now I got to be dad. It's time to be dad. And I have like this it's kind of like an alter ego where I'm like, hey, this is dad time. And then all of that stuff, I try and drop it. It's not perfect. I try and leave it and then go in and be the best dad that I can possibly be. And that's kind of how I run it from time to time. Like, who needs me to be on my A game in that specific moment?
Right.
And that's kind of a compartmentalization.
A little bit.
I think you're developing. I had heard a story about a cop who came home every day and his wife saw him do this, and she knew what he was doing, but then somebody else saw him do it and asked the wife. And every day he would get out of his car, and he was the guy telling this story. He would get out of his car and he would mime. And if this worked for him, he would mime. Yeah, he would literally like mime, like pantomime, taking off a jacket and hanging it in the tree out in front of his house, and then walk in the door. And for him, miming this, he was taking off the police officer role and hanging it up outside before he walked in the house. And it was like a little mantra, a little physical reminder to not bring that stuff in the house with him. And somebody, saw him doing it and asked his wife, what's he doing? And she's like, he makes sure he doesn't bring the job home with him. So he has this little thing he does. And I mean, you could literally do anything. You could probably, you could make sure it's hanging your keys up in the same spot every time you come home, whatever it is for you. But obviously for you, it was this moment in the garage where you said, okay, I'm home, time to be a dad now. And I think that's a form of compartmentalization, because it's a physical shift in your mindset, as well as a mental one, because your demeanor changes. My wife said the first time she ever saw me in uniform, she's like, I didn't realize how tall you were.
Mark, the reason why I asked you that question is because for years I struggled with how to turn it off, how to be all three things, physically fit, good work ethic, and good husband. I realized through a bunch of years I was in an unhealthy relationship. And once I went through a really, I wouldn't say a bad divorce, but it wasn't a great divorce. That shift from that into dating I was probably not the best person ever. But I met someone who was really good, who I currently married this last weekend. And I've been with her for 3 years.
Congratulations, by the way.
Yeah, congrats, brother.
Thanks. For this first 6 months, it was probably up and down. We started dating with work and how to shift it and stuff. I was involved in a critical incident, and it kind of really messed with my brain. And then from there, when we really got into it, we started living together and everything started going well. I started calling her on the way home and telling her about my day, or telling her, hey, there's certain things I don't really want to talk about, kind of want to forget. I just want to talk, hey, we'll talk. And some days were better than others. And some days, I would just say, hey, I'm on my way home. This is what happened. That's it. And then I'll go and listen to music. But for the most part, I would call her and talk to her, and I still do it on the way home, and let her know about my day. So we get that out of the way, so that when I come home, late at night, whether it be, 7:30, 8:30, 9:30, 10, we have that moment that we're spending together where it's not work. It's just, this is what we're doing. We're in the moment. Say hi to the kids. The kids are generally asleep, and I'm like, thank God, I just want to deal with her and just spend time with her. And that's kind of how I started to deal with it. So I just wanted to know what you thought and how you dealt with it. And it kind of seems like it's all pretty similar. You were going through something, and then you figured it out, and then this is what works for you. And then everyone's going to have something similar and different at the same time.
Yeah. And first off, that is a very solid point. Now that I kind of think about it, that's exactly what I do on the way home. I do the same thing. I'll call her and I'll get that kind of stuff out of my mouth, out of my brain, so that way when we come home, we don't have to really talk about that stuff anymore. I also will listen to podcasts and stuff on the way home, but something you said there is like super critical. And it's like the biggest component to the reason why I succeeded in these areas and how I help other people succeed in those areas. And that is like the sharing of information. So Chuck, what you just said there was freaking incredible, because every single listener is like, oh, now I have a new idea, a new way that I can take this when I go home. Right. And that's really the power of what I do is Mastermind Teams. So it's like Mastermind Teams is a group of people who have very similar, like, let's say, core values, things that are important to them, right? But they also like understand what they do, what each other does for a living. So they can take all of these things and say, you know what, Chuck, that's a great idea. How about this? Or how about that? And what happens is the collection of great ideas. And when you have people who are like open-minded, because we all know that there's open-minded police who are willing to like look for like the answers, and there's closed-minded that are like, nope, this is the answer. This is the way it is. Can't teach an old dog new tricks. You know,
Right.
You have those people. And a lot of times we're forced to hang out with some of those people on duty, maybe sometimes in the car next to us.
I know the right way.
Exactly.
Yeah, I know
and
the
it's
way-
like, this is the
this
way
is
we've
the way
always
we've
done
always
it kind
done
of
it.
thing. Yeah, exactly. But if you start hanging out with other people who are like growth oriented, who are like, hey, I'm open to trying new things, then you can share and you can find the thing that's going to work for you. Because just because it worked for me doesn't mean it's going to work for everybody else. But if I share it with them and they share too, that's the power of a mastermind. Same thing with the health and fitness. Like, you start hanging out with people who value their health and fitness, you're going to start valuing it. You're going to start eating healthier. You're going to exercise. You're going to get out and move. But if you start hanging out with like somebody who's like a slug, who's like eating terrible food, who's like not making their family a priority, well, that's going to happen to you too, because it's that collection of ideas and concepts, no matter if it's a positive or a negative influence.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
The big fallacy that I was, as a kid, I thought, because I would be hanging out with kids that weren't, or as a teenager, hanging out with kids that weren't necessarily, the kind of people that my dad, the cop, wanted me hanging out with. And he's like, are you sure you should be hanging out with them? And my parents are divorced, so he didn't have a whole lot to say about it other than trying to, give me advice. And I was like, well, I'm trying to lift them up and be a good example for him. He goes, that's not how that works.
Yeah.
And I said, what do you mean? And he says, you will always be dragged down by the people around you to the lowest common denominator. You sink to the lowest level. You don't raise the people around you. And I've learned now as an adult that that's a truism. You can maybe have one guy that a bunch of positive people try to lift up, but if you surround yourself with negativity, if you surround yourself with the same old crap, that's where you're going to sink to. That's what you're going to fall back to.
Yeah. And do you mind if I share something with you when it comes to that? So I was teaching my mastermind this too. There's something called the 3 levels of reach. The 3 levels of reach. So down, to the side, and up. All right. So most of the time we spend 95% of our life reaching down, like to people who need help. People call us. We have to go over there, negativity, all that kind of stuff. Right. People who are like, we want to like lift them up, right? Maybe people who aren't exercising, maybe people who aren't making their family priority, like younger cops who are giving it all, and we want to lift them up, right? Well, if we spend 95% of the time reaching down, of course, you're the average of the 5, you're naturally going to get pulled down. But there's other 2 levels of reach you got to make sure you do. Number 1 is across. So you gotta find people who are like on the same level as you, like same level of leadership as you, same like core values as you, because doing that will like get you to like just be able to push each other. And here's the thing, like we're like capable of so much. It's just that we like put our own limitations on ourselves. But when we have people who are like challenging us a little bit, boom, we don't realize it, but we raise each other up to the levels of what our full potential is. But at the same time, we need to be able to reach up. You need to reach up to a mentor, somebody who's a few steps ahead of you, somebody who's like maybe been there before, somebody who's done that before. You know what I mean? Yep. And so if you have these 3 levels of reach, you have to reach down. Like it's a part. That's what we do, right? We reach down, we lift people up. But if you're spending 95% of the time there and like 3% here and like 2% here, then you're like off balance. So like really analyzing that, I was challenging my mastermind team to go, okay, like you guys have us, right? We're the mastermind team. So you're reaching across. You have all of these guys and girls who are first responders and police officers. You reach down a lot. Are you reaching up enough? And like, that's like something that I like to challenge people with is like actually analyze where you're spending your time right now. Are you just reaching in one direction, and what other directions do you need to add?
Well, and that goes with, what you're saying about reaching, I guess out instead of up is the concept of iron sharpening iron.
Yes.
And I think for me, a big deal that I will beat the horse on till it's dead, and then I'll beat it some more. I always tell people that the only thing black and white about police work is the cars. Everything else is a variation of a shade of gray. Everything else, like there is no hard, fast answers, right? But because of that, right, we have to have accountability, right? Mm-hmm. And part of having accountability, like you were saying, everybody thinks of accountability as
like the mentor, right? Like the reaching up, where you reach up and then an authority figure holds you accountable. But what people miss is one of the most important levels of accountability is peer accountability. 100%. The guy that's on equal footing with you, the guy who you tell your problems to, and he tells you his problems or her problems. You bitch about your wife or your husband and they bitch about theirs, and you find common ground. You find that you share these experiences, but more importantly, you respect their thoughts because it's not like you said, reaching down or reaching up. With reaching down, you're like, you don't know what the hell I'm talking about. You haven't experienced it yet. Or when you're reaching up, you're like, oh, you're so far removed from it. You're way past this. You don't even remember what it's like to be down here. But those guys that are on the same level with you, they can call you on your bullshit in a way that you can't evade, because there's no excuse. You've already commiserated with them. You've already identified these people as your peer group, and you already know that they know their shit. So when one of those guys calls you out and goes, dude, I think you're wrong on this one. We used to call it a temperature check. You'd call your homie and you'd just like, hey, I need a temperature check. I need to know if I'm out of line or if everybody else is. And that accountability with your reaching out, I guess is what your terminology is. Yep. That is a huge thing that so many people miss. Yeah, they do. They do.
And we're not just talking about that for work life. We're talking about that in
that's everyday
life. Yeah. Yeah. I looked at that myself and found people that are on the same playing field with me, got with a woman who was on the same level as me and a little bit higher. So I always had something to strive to match. And it's still not there because she's a lot smarter than me. And then, I've always been a helper in like you just said, 95% of the time, I was always trying to help people. I was always trying to change them or make them better. And I ended up finding myself personally, down there, not really on a level playing field with anybody else, because I was focusing more of my time trying to help other people or trying to make them better or whatever.
Right. The phrase is misery loves company for a reason.
Yeah.
And it may be a cliche or whatever you want to say it, but I always say stereotypes come from somewhere. Well, so do cliches.
Yeah. So, Marc, did you go to college or something for this? Because you have a lot of experience, or at least a lot of knowledge.
No, you don't sound like a cop. You sound like a motivational speaker.
Yeah,
I am. That's kind of my gift. My gift is definitely inspiration, motivation. So they coined me as a push coach, but I also have a certification through a life coach through the Life Coach School.
That's a thing.
It is a thing. It is a thing. Okay. Look it up. Brooke Castillo. She actually has a pretty awesome podcast called the Life Coach School. But yeah, it's I get people to just really show up for themselves. And I don't know what it is. I didn't have this back when I started my business, but just having to force myself, and my first videos were the most terrible things ever. But then after doing it over and over and over again, they started to have me do it when I was on duty, and it just kind of caught on. But yeah, I really love to give people that push, because here's the thing, we all have people in our lives, even our friends and family, who are they're going to kind of take it easy on you, right? They're going to be like, dude, you had a hard day today. Take it easy. You're good to take a little bit of time off. Yeah. My mom, if you ask, if I say anything, she's going to be like, oh, son, you've got so much stuff going on. Right. But you also need that person to kick you in the butt sometimes. You need that person to go, you know what? I'm not saying this because I want to be rude. I'm saying this because I know what your potential is, and it's much higher than this, man. It's time to keep showing up. You told me that this was important. And even sometimes we get on phone calls and they tell me about the things that are important. And then, the alarm goes off in the morning time. And then for some reason, the snooze button looks really more important to them than what they just told me. Right. And so just getting people to show up is kind of my, my superpower. So I try to use that as best as I can anywhere.
Yeah. Well, I can definitely tell, because you're probably one of the most upbeat cops I've ever met in my life, to the point where if I didn't know your background and know that you were into motivational speaking and running a business, doing this kind of stuff, I'd actually be suspicious of you.
That's good. Then I'm doing it right, my friends. Yeah. I'm doing it right. I don't want to be, I am bald. So I do walk in and everybody's like, hey, I think I know you. Right. I always get that all the time too, but
sure.
But yeah, I definitely want to be able to not play that role. So when I am retired, which is a year and a half, I'm going to go to 20 and out, Chuck. I don't know about you, man, but I'm 20 Amazing. And out, and I'm going to do this business full time. But yeah, I don't want to be that person where everybody's like, oh yeah, everybody, the only person in the room, they're like, yeah, that guy's a cop, And so right. I hope I'm doing it right.
Well,
think
I always
it's
say that if people are too happy, I begin to suspect that they have a dead hooker in their trunk, because nobody is that happy when they live in this world.
I think it's just your upbeat personality, your energy, and it gets other people excited about what they're doing. And I think that's, you say that's your superpower, but honestly, I think that your superpower would probably be a combination of that and your upbeat energy that gets people excited.
Yeah, it does kind of, it does seem like it's infectious a little bit.
It is. I mean,
go ahead.
Oh, I've worked with people like that, and at first I was like, "Oh my God, stop, please."
I'm definitely not everybody's cup of tea for sure.
No,
Everybody, they're like, "Hey, dude, hang out with me more," and then I get the other, "Hey, bro, you can stay over on that side of the squad room," and I'm cool with that.
Right, but then
most people I don't want to like anyway.
but then it kind of caught on to me, and I was kind of more, I was a little bit more happy. And because that person was happy, and it took a little bit because I fought it because I don't like to be happy, apparently. And then when I realized it's okay to be happy, it allowed it to go. There was a dude at work, just due to confidentiality, will not say it. He's an actor as well. He's also sang, was it the national anthem for the Dodgers?
Yep, I know you're talking about.
Yeah, you do.
Okay, you're getting specific enough that you'll be able to figure it out. So I would stop now.
So he was like that, and great guy. And it really showed me a lot of things. Had a lot of personal conversation with the guy, as well as my wife's like that. And at first, I didn't like it. I was like, dude, she's too affectionate. What's wrong with her?
Right.
I don't know why.
See, what's wrong with us that we're like that? Right?
Dude, I don't know.
There's so many cops.
We're suspicious
and I'm
of
the
everything.
Same way. We're suspicious of everything. Everybody's lying to us, like all that kind of stuff. The other day I had this moment, and I looked at my wife, and everybody knows that from listening to this podcast, both this one and Locker Room, that I'm real happy I moved. I'm in one of the most beautiful areas of the country in free America, and I've got a good job now, and I got a nice house, and I've got my kids and got my wife and all that kind of, everything's going okay. And I had this moment the other day, and I came home and I was just anxious. And my wife goes, "What's wrong?" And I said, "I'm waiting for the shoe to drop." And she goes, "What are you talking about?" And I'm all, "Nothing is this good for this long. Like I'm waiting for and it was really an actual problem with me that I had to I have to mentally recondition myself that you can't go through life expecting terrible around every corner, or guess what? You're going to find it.
Yeah, it'll be terrible every day.
Yeah. And even when it's not, you'll make it terrible just with your own feelings and thoughts and stuff like that. So you do really have to, you do have to step outside of yourself, and you can't ask a computer to figure itself out. It's a computer. It can only do what it's programmed to do. So the accountability part is a big factor in that too, because it's the people outside of you that are going to go, "Bro, hey, I think you're a little out of control on this one. I think you need to dial it back."
So Marc, do you guys in your programs, do you deal a lot with and I coined the term for myself called self-sabotage, where something's good and you just want to sabotage it because you don't feel like, one, you're worth it, or two, it's just not normal, it's not right.
Yeah, 100%. We coin them as limiting beliefs. There's things. Let me kind of describe a limiting belief to you. So they're basically kind of thoughts that are unconscious thoughts that you have in the back of your head. It's kind of like that software system that everything runs through. And if there's anything where it kind of goes against that, you will literally sabotage yourself to basically make sure that that limiting belief in your brain actually still continues to be true. I mean, it's kind of like that thing. I hear this all the time. Police are like, "I just don't have the time." Right? I just don't have the time. Well, when you say that first verbally, it actually attaches to one of these limiting beliefs. Now you will look for the evidence in your day to prove the fact that you don't have time. You'll be like, "Well, I don't have this. I don't have this. I don't have this. I don't have this." And just like that thought,
it's confirmation
in the back
bias.
of your head, it's basically now you're looking out there. It's kind of like, when I was working gangs, they were like, "Hey, look for this Toyota Camry. It's a white Toyota Camry." You'd see them everywhere, right? And it wasn't because they weren't there before. It's because that's what you're focusing on. And it's the same with that. But if you're like, "Hey, you know what? My schedule's busy, but how might I find the time if this is actually something that's important to me?" Then you just start, now you're open to okay, how could I find the time? And you're going to find pockets. You're going to be doing this or this that you shouldn't be doing. But if you shut the door and you say "I don't have time," that's just like one of those limiting beliefs that you'll never find time. It will literally be a self-fulfilling prophecy. And so, yeah, we talk about that a lot because we tend to do that. We tend to self-sabotage. A lot of it is like, I'm not worthy. I'm not good enough. I don't deserve it. Like all those kind of thoughts. They're things that we've grown up with. They were ingrained in us since we were small. So they're not even conscious thoughts. They're kind of like unconscious. But we kind of like go about our day searching for evidence that it's true. And we find when we find evidence against it, we're like, whoa, hold on. Like you were saying, like something has got to go wrong. And then guess what? You're now looking for things to go wrong. Guess what? Everything goes wrong all the time. It's just that now you're looking for it, right? And
well, anybody that doesn't know, if you don't believe that this concept is real, think back to when you buy a new car, and the next thing you know is you see that car everywhere. Mm-hmm. Right? Everybody's had it. They buy a car, and then all of a sudden, like, oh, that car's just like mine. Oh, that car, I have that car. Oh, that's it. And so, what I think you're talking about, conceptually, is confirmation bias, right? Mm. And for those of you who've studied, any biases or rhetoric or anything like that, confirmation bias is the tendency for us to take new evidence and use it not in any sort of objective way, but actually just look at the evidence as confirmation of stuff we already believe instead of analyzing it for what it is. So you can spin, it's basically spin. You can spin it into whatever you want it to be because that's what you already believe.
Mm-hmm. I struggled with the whole self-sabotage, still do, but I've recognized it now, and I swear to God, I'll be in an argument. Me and my wife will be in an argument over something so stupid, and I'll stop and go, wait, hold on. I'm self-sabotaging myself because I don't feel like I deserve you, and that's the reason why this whole thing started. And I'll just apologize. I'm like, I'm sorry, whatever. And she's like, stop, like just don't. You are worth it. And I'm like, I get it, And I think that a lot of coppers out there that they do struggle with it, just for the simple fact that oftentimes us in the military, leading cause. And for relationships is divorce in the military and police department because we're gone for such a long time. So when you see that constantly happening around you, you feel like sometimes if you have something good, you're not worth it. And you're like, well, it's got to end. So, you start self-sabotaging it.
Mm-hmm. And let me just say, man, just acknowledge and appreciate you for sharing that first off, Chuck, because that happens to all of us. But to have the awareness to stop and bring that to your conscious mind and go, wait, why am I doing this? That is something that will change the game, right? Awareness is the key to change, right? First, becoming aware that is actually happening. I mean, I have this happen to me all the time with my kids. Like they'll be at the table and they'll just do something. And like my natural response is something like, oh man, if I were to do that, I would have gotten the backhand or I would have done, but instead I'm just sitting there going, wait, okay, they're 10 and 12. Like, why am I making what they're doing mean something about me as a parent? Like, why am I making this distinction in terms of, okay, so my son, like, let's say he burps really loud at the table. Why am I making that mean something about me, that maybe I'm not a good parent or that maybe I didn't teach him any manners? When in reality, he's 10 years old and I probably did the same exact thing. And he's just doing that. It's funny because even if you go to a different country, like burping is like a sign that the food was good, right? But now I'm making it mean that he's like, oh, and then I'm just so upset. And instead I take a second and go, wait, like, hold on a second. Like, why? It doesn't have to mean that. Like maybe it's just, something else. And, you realize you can separate yourself from that situation. And then you can when you're not angry, then you can make a better decision, right? As opposed to just going back and forth. Cause then you always know it goes up, right? It's like telling somebody to calm down who's already not calm, right? You're like, hey, calm down. And that always works, right? No,
okay, hold on. Time out. Let's call it like it is. It's like telling your wife to calm down.
Yeah. It's not gonna
I always
happen.
say you never know how upset your wife can get until you tell her to calm down, and you never know how crazy she can get until you tell her she's crazy.
Oh yeah, don't.
It's bad newe's.
Yeah,
don't
calm down thing definitely does not work.
No.
But also, I mean, so much of that, like, and we're being, I'm going to confess this right away. And I've said this before. I know that our podcast is kind of like a form of group therapy, right? And I still say I don't believe in group therapy, right? So I'm fully aware of I'd rather do it and call it something else than admit that it is what I don't want it to be. Right? That's my personal thing, right? So like, as you're sitting here saying things to Chuck about, I appreciate you for sharing that, and there's an ingrained like need to me where I'm like, shut up, you freaking therapist. Yep. and yet at the same time, like, I know in the front part of my brain that everything you're saying is correct. So we all fight against, like Chuck says, his self-sabotage. Mine, I call them, I have these tapes, right? These tapes that play in the back of my head all the time. And everything I do is set to those tapes. So if my wife does something and it reminds me of something that happened to me growing up, and I'm like, well, that must be what it is, because that's what that looks like. Or if like you said, with the burping at the table, I've had to really look at like my kids and go, okay, I just because it happened to me, or just because that's what my parents did, doesn't mean that it's the right way to handle it. It was just their way of handling it. And they didn't have a magical instruction book. So I can decide what kind of parent I want to be. I can decide what kind of husband I want to be, and I can decide what kind of cop I want to be. But I have to make conscious choices instead of just falling back to doing what the tapes in my head tell me to do.
Right. Just the automatic response, right? Taking the automatic out of it. Because I mean, that's kind of like what habits are and what those unconscious thoughts kind of do, right? Like if we had to think about how to walk all the time, I mean, even just think about that. Like you got to lift one foot up and then move it forward 6 inches and then put it down on the ground and then shift your weight. Like, can you imagine if you had to think about that every time? Life would be exhausting. Yeah. And so like all of the other things too, like the responses to kids, like our responses to getting angry, responses to people yelling at us, all of those things are automatic too, because they've happened so many times that we just have this repetitive thing. But like you said, like taking a step back and going, okay, like I don't want the automatic stuff to take over right now. This isn't like brushing my teeth or walking. This is like a little bit serious, more of a conversation with my wife or with my kids, that you can actually make sure that you can take control of it.
So now if we have coppers out there or other, veterans, first responders, firefighters, EMTs, if they want to be part of your program or part of what you're doing, how do they find you?
I appreciate that. So I have a couple of things. Number one is I have a podcast too. It's called the Leo Family Fitness Podcast. So if people are just wanting to do free stuff, and I have Mastermind Teams. So if you hit me up on Instagram, I'm Leo Family Fitness. If you hit me up on Facebook, I am First Responder Fitness with Marc. Any one of those, you'll be able to send me a direct message. And if it's my assistant, she'll shoot it my way. And then you can learn about our mastermind teams or however I can help. But like I said, if you want free stuff, I have my own podcast too.
Nice. And the podcast is which one? The
Leo Family Fitness.
Leo Family Fitness podcast, right? And that's on Google, Apple, Spotify, everything. All the normal stuff. And then you have Facebook, Instagram, all that. And is it a program that there's a program that people can actually sign up for where they go somewhere, or is it all virtual? How does it work?
It's all virtual. So I have my own private app. One thing that I wanted to make sure of is to disconnect people from like the regular world, because like even Facebook or Instagram stuff, that it can be a positive place, but there's a lot of negativity and BS, and that can literally take over our thoughts for like the whole rest of the day if we start off wrong. So I have my own private app. How you get into it, you can't like actually do a search through it. You have to be invited directly from me. And so, yes, I have virtual kind of like masterminds where we meet together usually once a week. We talk about like some of the same stuff that we talked here about, just like different ideas, different concepts around those 3 pillars, the Leo Family Fitness. So something around our career and being better leaders and creating better leaders, like, because obviously we want to create better leaders to come in and take over our position here so that I can retire right in 2 years. Family, right? So family, not only the connection with your significant other, but also with your kids. And then your fitness, not just your mental fitness, but your physical fitness, your emotional fitness, like all of those wellness words, catchphrases, because that ultimately is what all 3 of those kind of hold each other up.
Yeah, that's true. So for those of you that think this is something that's going to make a positive impact in your life, or you're looking, even if you're just looking for something to try, Marc's a very positive guy. Clearly, he's one of the most upbeat cops I've ever met in my entire life, with the exception of any of the rookies I've ever trained, because by the time they get done with FTO, they're not as positive as Marc anymore.
For sure.
So I appreciate you coming on, Chuck. We like to dedicate our every episode to a brother or sister, officer, veteran, or other first responder, firefighter that has paid the ultimate sacrifice. And as we approach Memorial Day, this is even more important. and Marc has graciously said we can go ahead and handle it this episode. So who are we dedicating our episode to this week, Chuck?
Well, it's going to be two officers from the same sheriff's office, and both their end of watches were Monday, May 10th, 2021. That is a significant date because that's when Detective Benedetti and Jimmy In, police officer Jimmy In, lost their lives.
4 law enforcement officers in 24 hours.
Yeah, in 24 hours. So they were both from Concho County Sheriff's Office in Texas. Samuel Alexander Leonard was a deputy sheriff, and Sergeant Stephen Jones were shot and killed while responding to a complaint about a dog on the 100 block of Bryan Street in Eden, Texas. An altercation occurred, and both deputies, along with an Eden municipal employee, made contact with the subject at a residence. The subject fatally shot both deputies and critically wounded the city employee before barricading himself inside of the home. The city mayor, who lived nearby, talked to the man into surrendering approximately 30 minutes later. The man has been charged with 2 counts of capital murder of a police officer. Deputy Sheriff Leonard served with the Concho County Sheriff's Office for 6 months, having spent 1.5 years as a deputy officer. He was 26 years old. His tour was 1 year and 6 months. His badge number is 2402. Here we go. Sergeant Stephen Jones. His age was 34. Tour of 8 years. Badge number is 2404. And both were killed by gunfire.
Now, I mean, rest easy, brothers. We got it from here. I just want to use this as a moment to point out that they were going to a barking dog call, right? They were going to a dispute over a barking dog. Boys and girls, it's getting rougher out there for police officers, especially. And we're starting to lose police officers at a rate greater than we lost people at the height of the war on terror. So keep your head on a swivel, okay, and be vigilant. And you know, I'm going to give you all my dad's advice that he gave me. A good cop eats, stays dry, and goes home at the end of his shift. So do those things, protect the public, serve the community, but at the end of the day, go home to your family and keep your head on a swivel. Marc, I want to again thank you for coming on. It's been fun. And if you ever need Chuck and I to come on and wreck your podcast, we're more than happy to come out and talk about all of our personal demons and our failures and foibles. And we appreciate you coming on with your positivity and your upbeatness, because, like I said, in real life, I would instantly be suspicious of you at the station, but I'd like to think that after a short period of time, you'd win me over, and we'd be having brew dogs and watching a game or having a barbecue. So I appreciate you coming on here and talking about all that stuff you got going on. It is necessary. It really is. It's just, I guess for a lot of cops, it's going to be weird to think of a cop doing that stuff as opposed to like a counselor or a therapist or, you know, someone from BSS or anything like that. But if you think about it this way, who better to do that stuff than somebody who's been there, done that, and got the t-shirt to prove it. So,
hey man, you're doing a really good job. I mean, keep it up.
Yeah.
You know, you're very informative. You're very educated, and you can tell just by the way you talk, and the way you carry yourself. And I can see why you're successful and going to retire in 2 years and go ahead and do this full time.
Oh,
good job.
I would argue that even if he was not successful, he should retire in 2 years with the way things are going right now, man. I actually did the math on how close I would be to retirement. And, I'm just thankful that if I was still working, I would be as close to retirement as I am right now. 'Cause I'd have about the same time on as Marc. So I'd be about 1.5 years, 2 years away from retirement. And I've got a friend of mine. He was one of my mentors. He's thinking about going to the full 30. And, I looked at him and said, you know, brother, I respect you for that, but I don't know that I could in this day and age. And luckily you're at a level now where you're, watching after the coplings that are, out on the street as you sit behind a desk and be the lieutenant you always wanted to work for. But still, man, good for you for sticking it out.
Right. I appreciate it, guys. Thank you very much for having me on.
Thank you. And until our next episode, come home with your shield or on it.